In this video, I'm going to talk about how to self-edit your book. So once you've finished writing your first draft, before you turn it over to other people who you might want to critique it or to edit your book, this is what you should do to make sure you make a few improvements to it. Before we get started, I want you to check out the link that's in the description for this video. It will take you to a workshop that I have on my website, and the workshop is called Jumpstart Writing Your Book. And it's designed to help you get going as you're writing your first book. So click on that link and check out the workshop. The workshop is free, so I want to encourage you to write your book, and that workshop is one way I'm encouraging you to do that. If you want to see more videos like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button. So let's jump into this video. Specifically, what I'm going to talk about are the 3 steps I recommend in the self-editing process, as well as some tips on how you can self-edit more effectively. Here are the 3 steps I recommend. First of all, do a big picture edit. And this is really looking at the book level. So does the entire book make sense? Are the scenes in a compelling, clear order? And is it organized overall in a very compelling way? The next step is the style edit. And this is where you look at the book at the chapter level or the scene level. And you're looking to make sure each section of the book is interesting, that your writing style is compelling, that you're consistent throughout the way you communicate. And then the final step is the details edit. And this is where you go through line by line, word by word, punctuation point by punctuation point, and you make sure that all of the details are correct. So let's go into the big picture edit. Really what you're looking for in the big picture edit is the overall organization and flow of your book. So can the reader follow along with you? Is it clear what you're trying to communicate? Do you have a very logical, very smooth flow? And some of the things you look for is you look for plot holes or leaps. So if there's a hole in your plot and your characters appear somewhere else, or if you're writing a nonfiction book and you're explaining your logic, are there any leaps in your logic? And you're also looking for major inconsistencies. Is there anything that's inconsistent about the way your characters talk or about the way you're writing? So for example, if you're telling the book in present tense, do you flip back and forth and go into past tense? If you're writing in first person, do you switch over and go into third person? So make sure when you're doing this stage of your editing that everything is consistent throughout your book. And finally, look for opportunities to improve the overall flow. This is where you really think about, can the reader follow along with me? So here's one way of looking at it. Imagine that you're planning a trip for your reader and you're going to take them along a journey, and you want to make sure that that journey is logical and they can follow along with you. So you've got a clear starting point, you've got a clear route that you're taking them on, and then you've got a clear ending point. And if at any point along that journey, it's not clear where you're going, you can go back and rewrite that section. Here are some tips on how to do the big picture edit. First of all, read the book start to finish. So don't edit as you go along. What you should do is you should create an outline. So as you're reading through the book, just take notes. Write down what the scene is, write down what the act is, write down what's happening within the book. And then once you've created that outline, then you can go back and make improvements to the flow. Let me give you an example to illustrate how you might approach a big picture edit. In this example, a friend of mine was writing a book and he had 7 leadership lessons in his book. And his first draft included 1 chapter for each of those 7 lessons. What he realized is 2 of those lessons were very similar. So rather than having redundant lessons, he merged those 2 and came up with 6 chapters instead of 7. And then he went back and organized those chapters in a clear, logical flow and created a framework out of those. So his first draft wasn't organized. His second draft, the organization framework, was a leadership framework. So each lesson started with a letter from the word leader, and that helped the readers understand and follow along with its flow. When you do your big picture edit, make sure you go back and you think about how can you organize your book in a way that's clearer, more compelling, easier for the reader to follow along. That's how you approach the first stage of your self-edit, which is the big picture edit. Now let's look at the second stage, which is the style edit. When you're style editing, really what you're looking at is individual scenes and individual chapters. So you're trying to figure out, is the scene clear? Is it compelling? Are the characters interesting? Is the dialogue interesting? And you're really making sure the style is as compelling as possible. So specifically what you're looking at is, are you using an engaging, consistent writing style throughout each chapter? Are the chapters and the paragraphs flowing smoothly together? And do the characters speak and behave in interesting ways? So you're really trying to improve the impact of your writing within this edit. Here are some tips on how to do a style edit. First, read the book chapter by chapter, and for each chapter, create an outline. What's happening in the chapter, what's the dialogue, what are the characters, and then as you're creating the outline, make notes of areas that you can improve. And look for inconsistencies, look for places that you can polish whatever's happening in the chapter and whatever is going on in the paragraphs. So let me give you another example. Let's go back to the book I was talking about with the leadership lessons. What we found was when Larry was writing this book, each chapter was organized in a different way. He would include quotes and concepts and stories and application questions and more quotes and more stories. And some of the chapters were very different in the order than the first chapter. Actually was fascinating. It was really well written. It was really well organized. But then every chapter after that followed a different structure. So he went back and said, wow, if that first chapter is that effective, let me use that flow for all 6 leadership lessons that he has in the book. And that flow was, he started every chapter with a quote. Then he explained the concept. So if the leadership lesson was leading with diversity, he would explain what leading with diversity meant. Then he would tell a headline story. This is a real world modern day example of how somebody demonstrated that leadership story. Then he'd have a few supporting examples that would be two or three shorter stories about people demonstrating that leadership ability. And then he would summarize the chapter and he would give the reader application questions. And then he would repeat that approach for every chapter after that, making it really easy for the writers to follow along. Also, he noticed that when he was writing, he would switch the style of his writing. In some sections, it would be very formal and it would sound almost academic. In some areas, it would be very casual and very relaxed. In some areas, it was more of an in-between, semi-formal approach. And what he found was the most compelling way for him to write was that semi-formal approach. So he took notes of areas where his writing was inconsistent, and then he went back and he used a consistent semi-formal style. Once you finish the style edit, it'll be time to move on to your details edit. So in the details self-editing process, you're really looking at each individual detail of the book. So is everything accurate? Is everything precise? Specifically, what you look for are things like, are you using proper spelling? Are you using proper grammar? Do you have the right punctuation in each sentence? Are you using the right choice on words? So for example, there are 3 different ways to say there. If it's THERE versus THEIR versus THEY apostrophe RE, are you using the correct version of the word in each sentence? And then, are you consistent with the way you name your characters and your places in your book and other details? It's very common for writers to go through a book and name a character one thing and then somewhere throughout the book end up calling them by a different name. So in this stage of the editing, you should take note of things like that. So tips for detail editing include things like read word for word and sentence for sentence. So you're really looking through detail, 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 and then correct any mistakes as you go along. Remove any unnecessary sentences, any unnecessary words, and then replace repetitive words. So if you find that you're using a word like excellent over and over and over again, find a different way to say excellent. Say outstanding, say exceptional, say compelling. So don't repeat words over and over again. And if you see that you're doing this, the details edit is where you should catch that. Going back to the book I used in the previous examples, when Larry did his self-edit on the detail phase, really what he was looking for is he would start by running a spell check to make sure the spelling was accurate. Then he would check the different variations of the words to make sure he was using the right word choice in every sentence. And then he'd correct any incorrect punctuation and then get rid of any overused words. Those are the 3 steps in the self-editing process. And if you think about the different types of editing, they will resemble what different editors will do for you. So in the first step, the big picture edit, you're really doing the work of what a beta reader or a developmental editor will do. So you want to make sure when you turn your book over to beta readers and developmental editors, the big picture flows, and that way they can follow along and they can make any refinements. When you're doing the style edit, you're really doing the work of a line editor. And the line editor will go through and say, oh, they've already improved the style. Let me take it a little bit further and improve it a little bit more. And then finally, when you're going through the details edit, you're really doing the job of a proofreader. So you want to make sure that when you're turning your book over to proofreaders, you've already gone through and you've checked the spelling, the grammar, and the punctuation, and the proofreaders can just put the final corrections in place. Here are a few secrets when it comes to the self-editing process. First of all, the 3-step process I've shown you will save you a lot of time and a lot of money later. If you can go through and do the high-level developmental editing, do the line editing, and do the proofreading, then when you have editors do that for you later, they can do it more quickly, they can be more precise, they can really give you refined corrections as opposed to starting from scratch. Next, the steps should be done in order, and there's a reason for this. What you don't want to do is go through and do your detail edit and perfect a scene, and then do your high-level edit and decide, I really didn't need that scene, so I'm going to remove it. So don't perfect things that you may end up getting rid of. What you do instead is you get the big picture in place first. You make sure you have all the right scenes, you have all the right plot points. Then you go through and you improve your style. And then finally, you nail down the details. And then the third secret is it's really important that you strive to make your book better. Don't strive to make it perfect. You could spend days and months and years doing your self-edits. Don't do that. Just go through the book 3 times, high level, mid-level, detail level, and then once you're done with it, turn it over to somebody else to look at, and that way they'll have a fresh set of eyes. They can find things that you might have missed. Here are a few tips for your self-editing process. First of all, change the device that you're using to look at the book. So if you've written the entire book using a laptop, when you do your big picture edit, you might want to use a tablet instead. And that way you're seeing the words in a different way. When you look at the words on the same device over and over and over again, you tend to tune out things because you just know what's there, so you miss the details. When you switch to a different device, that kind of triggers your brain to look at it differently. Also, you can change the font, you can change the font style, you can change the color, and that will also help your eye notice things that it wouldn't have noticed previously. And then finally, for the details edit, I recommend you don't read the book, you actually listen to it. Or better yet, listen to the book as you're reading it. Most devices will let you do a text-to-speech feature, and what I'll do is I'll do a video later that explains how you have your device read the book to you so you can listen for mistakes. What this does is when you're listening to a book, you will notice if you have an incorrect word. You will notice if the grammar is inaccurate, because sometimes when we're reading, we're making corrections subconsciously, and when we're listening, we really hear mistakes as we hear them. So that's a really good way to do your detail self-edit is use the text-to-speech feature and listen to your book as you're going through it. Your action steps for this lesson are, first of all, do your self-edit and do it in the 3 phases that I talked to you about. First of all, do your big picture self-edit, and as you're doing it, do a 1-page outline for the entire book. Next, do your style edit and do a 1-page outline for each chapter or each scene that's in your book. And then finally do the detail edit. And when you're doing the detail edit, make your corrections as you go. And while you're doing this, use different devices. Use a laptop, use a tablet, listen to your book. Using different formats and using different devices will help you notice errors that you might have missed if you'd looked at it the same way you've been looking at the book as you've been writing it. So that's the self-editing process. It will now be time, once you finish your self-edit, to turn your book over to other people to get their input on it. Remember, go to the description of this video and click on the link to see my workshop, Jumpstart Writing Your Book, and hit that subscribe button if you want to see more videos like this.